Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got a lot to go into. Our topic is so interesting, the hidden forces of the universe. Jeff's going to go into that. And of course, he's going to touch on our hot topics and the insanity that's going on. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeff. Let's get started.
Well, the first thing we could talk about is I always like to cover the energies that are coming up for the next week. And we have some really interesting stuff. Everyone knows that Mercury, of course, is retrograde. It's actually going to go into the combustion of the sun on next Wednesday, which is, of course, the 6th. And it'll actually do something called Kazumi or Cassimi. People pronounce that differently. But what that means is Mercury goes through the eye of the sun, right through the center. And one of the generally accepted conditions is when it's 17 minutes before, when it's exact, and when it's 17 minutes after. These are very, very powerful energies, and they often go by unnoticed. Like that will happen here on Wednesday, just after midnight on the Pacific time. And of course, if you're in a different place of the globe, extrapolate accordingly. And that's about 22 minutes after midnight on the Pacific daylight time. Then it's going to go into the sun, and it takes all the way up to about 4 a.m., almost 4 hours before it exactly happens, about 4:15 a.m. And then right after that, it's going to go out to its elongation of 17 minutes. And then, of course, it keeps going. And that does it about 8 o'clock in the morning. So basically, this happens Pacific daylight time throughout the whole night, from midnight to about 8 in the morning is when this process happens. And you can actually break these down. I've actually studied these. It's really interesting to examine the energies. Many people of the past would do things during these meditations. They would do alchemical things, or they would charge various different things. So this is really some deep stuff that people would pay attention to with the angelic energies, which we're going to talk a little bit later about the hidden forces of this universe, but something to be aware of. And if you're on the other side of the world, of course, that might happen for you in the daytime. And of course, if you're on the East Coast, add 3 hours, right? Or in the middle. Most people in the United States are going to find that's going to happen from midnight to 8 a.m. Or if you're on the East Coast or Midwest, it's going to happen pretty late in the a.m. of the morning, the early morning. I also wanted to mention too that this week on the 8th, which is, of course, this coming Friday next week, we're going to have this whole week the sun trining Jupiter, which is a really good energy. And I like to bring up good energies once in a while, too. So the sun trine Jupiter is very productive. And that's because you'll find Jupiter and Saturn always get trined by the sun right before they're either going retrograde or they're stationing and going direct. It's just the way they actually make a Star of David, the way they move around the sun, which is very sacred. And it's going to be making this trine to stationary Jupiter between now and this Friday. So we've got that. We also have Venus still retrograde. Now, Venus goes direct on 9/3. So that's just now gone direct. Very, very powerful. And that will go actually direct on the 3rd at 6:25 p.m. again, Pacific daylight time. And again, look at all the crazy stuff we've seen. The fires in Europe, the fires in Canada, and of course the Maui fires, which more and more is coming out on that. Now, I know there's a lot of different theories about the Maui fires, but one of the official theories is, and it kind of blows a big hole in the climate change gurus, and that is that the Maui government came out and has actually charged the power company in Maui with negligence because they said that is exactly what caused all the fires. Of course, them not cleaning up the debris and, of course, sparks from the power line. And interestingly enough, I saw that it was definitely electrical related when we first looked at it, that, if you remember, back like a couple of weeks ago.
That's what the chart showed.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, now that doesn't negate some of the other opinions I know people have, but it's definitely something technical and electrical that caused it. And that's kind of what it looked like. And horrible. Again, the loss of life there is horrible. And again, Canada has just really been, hit so hard. And so is Greece and other places in Europe. So a lot of crazy stuff going on. And I'm sure there was probably a lot of things that went on during this Venus inferior retrograde. And remember, just to review, Venus inferior retrogradation means it passed between the Earth and the sun. which is much, much stronger. And this is the Quetzalcoatl, Lucifer falling legend, and strange stuff always happens. And also we had a lot of other stuff going on in terms of more exposure with Biden, more stuff with Trump, on and on. So the games just keep on rolling. And anyway, so as we start moving into September, we're winding up into this very, very powerful energy that I was speaking about for a long time on the United States and the world at large. There's something called the ends of the signs in the sidereal zodiac, and we've got that happening with the nodes coming up right in November. In other words, Rahu and Ketu, which is the moon's eclipse points, are actually moving to the end. They move backwards. So it's moving to the end of the sign almost precisely when this primary directed moon over the United States is conjoining the United States Mars. Or I should say Mars is conjoining the United States moon. I said it backwards. But this is so powerful. And again, this has never happened before in the United States. Hope I'm wrong, but I think we're going to see some very serious events happen this fall. Too many things are pointing to it. And of course, in October, we have Saturn stationing directly over the moon from basically the 23rd of October right up to about the middle of November, about the 13th of November. And again, this brackets so much and sets up so much that I think is almost like a spring wound that's going to come undone here. As we get into this late fall and, of course, into next year. And then we start the Pluto return on the United States. Again, the thing that makes me a little happy, even though I think we're heading into really dark territory here coming up here, we do have progressions in the Nadi astrology that say there might be light at the end of the tunnel. We could potentially be the phoenix rising out of the ashes. Let's hope we are, because we certainly are seeing some crazy stuff in the world right now. The Fed is talking about raising interest rates again. They were just in Wyoming. And, everyone I talk to says, my God, if they raise interest rates again, I mean, it's going to crush small businesses because it makes money and credit lines too expensive. And of course, that exponentially raises costs again because everybody has to raise their prices. So not only do we have the insanity of the energy industry being shut down without any direct and viable alternatives, we're also seeing money get harder and harder to get. It's almost like somebody's trying to destroy the economy. What do you think? Maybe?
Well, we were just talking the other day about people having to buy food and clothes for their families using a credit card because they don't have the cash flow to do it. And what a disaster it is. I mean, such a disaster. I think, what is the credit card debt? It's trillions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that.
RFK was mentioning that too. Yeah, absolutely insane. Yeah, I mean, true wealth has been swirling down the drain. And, they'll call us conspiracy theorists, but it's not so. This is a fact. I mean, you look around some of the best economists, they're also really getting nervous about the housing market. And what do you think increased interest rates are going to do to real estate? It's going to choke off the sales. Now, there'll still be real estate sales, obviously, but it's making money more and more and more expensive to get. So see where all this goes. And of course, we've still got the war in Ukraine ratcheting up. We've got the BRICS nations now, for the first time ever, forming and buying oil in other currencies other than the USD. In fact, I've heard from a couple of people that for the first time ever, that India and other countries are buying oil in other currencies other than the reserve USD petrodollar. This is very dangerous. So we've got a lot of things bubbling and brewing in the world that I hope we get through without having any wars break out. But the owners like war. That's what they do to usher in their new agendas. And of course, we also mentioned, we're hearing more and more rattlings, like we said last podcast, about the COVID. Now the hospitals want to mandate new mask mandates. So here we go. And of course, it was Lionsgate. I think somebody mentioned that in the comments. Yeah. That the Lionsgate was the one that implemented the masks. So it's not going to be long. They're going to try and push this agenda on us again. And of course, Biden's back into Congress trying to push for more mandates and vaccines being developed for these new strains of COVID. So nothing to worry about, folks. Just your healthy government trying to look out for your best interests. So,
Oh, yeah. I was just talking to a friend yesterday in New York, and he said they're definitely pushing the masks again. It's going to be, there's going to be an uproar there for sure. I mean, people aren't going to go for it this time around. They really aren't. A large majority of people, I feel like, aren't going to go for it because we're seeing, and this isn't about conspiracy theories, right? Everything you're talking about, we're actually living it. We're seeing it happen. This isn't a conspiracy theory. We're living through inflation. We're seeing everything that's going on here. Where's the conspiracy theory?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And furthermore, like we've mentioned before, and even Elon Musk mentioned this on a Tucker Carlson interview, the last time the Fed was jacking up interest rates like this was right before the Great Depression. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get a Great Depression, but I tell you what, things do not look good right now. They really, really don't. People in construction that I'm speaking to who deal in building materials and real estate and other things, oil, etc., they're all saying the same thing. They're saying this is very precarious and very, very dangerous. And if they keep heading on the trajectory we're heading, I mean, the only difference between us and the Titanic is the Titanic had some good music and it went down, and even the music's not as good as it used to be, is it? But anyhow, we won't get into that. But so that's kind of a wrap up on some of the basic energies, and I'm basically touching one thing I would like to emphasize. And I want to make this clear because a lot of astrologers are mentioning this right now about the Vedic astrology and the tropical systems impinging upon the United States. We have both progressions and you could say the sidereal Vedic technique saying the same exact thing. We're really seeing some very powerful energies on the United States, particularly between now into next year. And again, next year, we start that Pluto return. So these primary directions are something a lot of people aren't mentioning, and I cannot overemphasize. It's a fancy term for the rotation of the Earth. And even if you're a flat earther, every day equals a year from the date that a person is born or a country is born. And they're called primary directions because it's primary motion of the diurnal and daily cycles. Well, the United States is 247 years old. So that means all the planets in this system are advanced by about 247 years. And this is putting the clock like tumblers on a safe, lining right up. Some very, very dangerous and volatile energies. And that one is definitely the Mars conjuncting the moon, which happens at the same time the world is going to experience the moon's eclipse points, known as Rahu and Ketu, leaving the end of a sign going into, well, I should say the beginning of a sign and into the end of the next sign. See, Gandanta is a fancy term in Vedic astrology that just means when the nodes or planets transition from either a water or fire trine or from a fire to a water. And that's exactly what's happening here coming up in November. And it's almost to the day that this primary directed Mars conjuncts the United States moon. So this is a really powerful energy that not only hits the United States, but also hits the entire world. So we're going to see some crazy stuff. And this gets into kind of our next topic about the hidden forces of the universe. Is astrology the be all end all? Does it really predict the future? Well, I'm going to let you be the judge after I go into a little bit of this stuff. So the interesting thing about Vedic astrology that attracted me to it was it's not just astrology. It's actually one principle of a number generally considered to be 6 things in Vedanta, which is very interesting. And you find the same thing in the rabbinical texts and the Egyptians. They knew a lot about astrology, but they also knew that it was only an interactive, you could say, matrix on the souls. And I'm going to put up one of my favorite diagrams. And again, this diagram shows a basic conceptual overview of creation. I think it's a decent one to show on a very complex topic that is way, way, way behind anything to do with my ability to fully discern this, or for that matter, any other human being, because this is exceedingly complex stuff. And you'll notice whatever your belief in God, creator is, it is at the top of this pyramid. And you'll see beneath that is the seraphims and the cherubims and the thrones. And I've talked about this many times before. This is known as the worlds of absolute, which is a strange word, and people do pronounce it differently, for the divine emanation of souls being created. And I believe there's a lot of types of souls. The human souls are certainly one that we're interested in, right? We're all human. But they claim there's animal, vegetable souls, and essences of all creation. And I do believe there's many other beings, both terrestrial and extraterrestrial, in these universes. So they claim there's 49 dimensions and 49 subdimensions here. The next world's down, Braya, of course, is where the waters of creation get much more dense. And they claim there's many spiritual worlds. Again, 49 dimensions and 49 subdimensions. And here you can see the angels of the dominance, virtues, and the powers are here. The next one down is probably the one that we want to focus on a lot, and that is called the Yetziratic world. Now, there's a text known as the Sefer Yetzirah. For anyone that's not familiar, Sefer in Hebrew and Aramaic means book, and Yetzirah means formation. And this is where you could say the whole amalgam of physics, quantum physics, and creation gets solidified down into the denser worlds. This is where the rotating galaxies are, the universes, and of course, where spirit very magically seems to transpose into physicality through the next worlds down. Now, they claim, before I get into that, I want to point out that they claim there could be 49 parallel universes and 49 subdimensions in each one. I don't know about you, but that's way past my ability to fully comprehend. That is way past human comprehension when you really step back and look at this. So then we get into the final worlds, which is Asaya. Asaya, and people do pronounce that slightly different. So if I'm not perfect, forgive me. But anyhow, this is the astral planes. And this, of course, is now where we get the real commixture of spirit, elementals, angels, archangels, intelligences, disincarnates, which we might call ghosts and people who have passed on or deceased, right? And then you have this whole realm of elementals. And some of these are referred to often as thought form elementals. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. It's a really important thing. And then last but not least, you have planet Earth. Some people know it as Gaia. Some people know it as, the physical realm. So really, this diagram is very, very good for us to look at because it gives us at least a simplified model of what it might truly be like. And talk about hidden forces. They actually claim that if the seraphims, cherubims, and the thrones were not chanting the permutations of God's name, the entire universes would evaporate in less than a nanosecond. And I believe that that's true. I really do. Any person who studied physics, quantum physics, or any types of the sciences will readily come to a conclusion that things are held in very stable states and, of course, intelligent states. We all know about atoms. We've heard about that since the third grade, right? And everything is protons, electrons, and neutrinos and all these spaces that quantum physicists talk about. They actually say if you reduce the space, you could literally take the human race and put it into a small cube if you reduce the space and all the atoms that are in your body. So this is fun and fascinating stuff. But where I'm going with this is something about what's happening in the world and has been happening in the world forever. I had a great conversation earlier today with a person, and we were talking about, the Holocaust and some of the other horrible things that have happened in many different cultures throughout this history of this world. And you wonder, how can this happen? We see this in the United States right now with this polarization, Republican, Democrat, right? I'm a this, I'm a that. And you have all these different cults almost going on of people willing to literally get into fistfights, dividing families, and certainly dividing the country over what they believe. Well, here's an interesting thing. They say we emit thought form elementals out of the third eye chakra, and they permeate our aura. In fact, there's an old saying in Hollywood, what you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear a word that you're saying. And I love that expression because it's true. When you look at somebody, you can see by their physiognomy, the way they hold their body language, etc., what they feel like, what their general projection and self-image is. We see some people are angry, some people are downtrodden, some people are confident, some people are this or that or what have you. So it shows not only in our physical body language and our expressions, but it also shows in the energy. You can feel people. These are the projections of the thought form elementals that are believed to emit out of the third eye chakra. If you've ever been involved in corporate sales work or religions or any other place, military, police, etc., you're going to find there's always a spirit of joining and getting behind what? The cause of the organization, right? This is a really big thing to trump up the, if you will, emotions and beliefs and excitement. These are magical, magical energies that we all have, and they project out into, it's almost like the voltage to these thought form elementals. This is why being passionate, being excited, and driven are the keys to success. So here's the interesting thing and where I'm going with this. So backing this out to 100,000 feet, you've got God, all these hierarchies of angels and these different worlds. And what's so fascinating about Vedic astrology is they talk about how spirit becomes manifest. So the astrology in Nadi and Vedic astrology, they believe is really the result of your karma, the elementals and the desires that you've created. One of my favorite books that I always mention, have for years, the Magus of Strovolos. And of course, there's a man named Daskalos, who was the Magus of Strovolos, who speaks a great deal about thought form and desire elementals. These are the projections of our hopes, our wishes, our feelings, all these things that permeate the aura. The magical thing is, this is the stuff science can't measure. They can't put a meter on it. They can't quantify it. They can't come up with a chemical or elemental constituent of what it is, because this is the fabric and the magic that seems to go with us from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. It's also the fabric that psychiatrists, psychologists deal with, and that is our beliefs, our inner core desires and beliefs. And boy, you look at every human being, aren't we all different? Every single person has these inner innate personality traits. Well, here's some more interesting things on the hidden forces of the universe. Exodus, which is also known as the 3 verses in the Bible, are permutations of a very ancient and sacred document called the Goetia, which is the goetic formation of the 72 angels of God. And isn't that interesting? 7 and 2 equals 9, right? Numerology, spiritual completion on the physical plane. And what's really important is most of your spiritual, you could say, traditions, and some people will call them magical as well, knew that these angels ruled like a menu, if you will, of human consciousness. And that's really interesting stuff, because when you study these, and there's a lot of ancient texts that have these in there, and I've got some of them. They're pretty interesting. And this is almost, if you will, like a matrix of energy that can be combined in almost infinite ways that seems to be what we keep experiencing through these incarnations until we finally escape from Alcatraz, if we want to, and move on to other realms. And many souls move up, if you want to call it that. for new experiences, or they become, you could say, disheartened with the physical planes and want to go back to the spiritual planes. Now, this is a vast topic, and I by no means claim that I'm some authority on this, but I think this is fascinating to speak about because it also relates to what we're seeing in the world right now, and we see it before almost any major wars. We always see it when there's conflicts between nations, and that is the people of the nations will either, there's an old term, divide and conquer. They will divide public opinion and bend it around. Propaganda is another word of it, where you get a certain faction to believe one thing, you get another faction to believe another thing, and now what do you got? You got two opposing forces. Well, there's your cocktail for conflict. And we've seen this throughout human history. People are willing to kill for it. In fact, George Carlin was right. War is when old men send young people off to war for their business interests. And it's kind of like that. Not that there isn't some just wars, but it's very interesting how beliefs and the elemental, you could say, belief systems possess various sects of society. And this has happened throughout history. It's really cool stuff. And we're seeing it right now.
We are. So cool and so interesting. And I wonder how much of it is our true belief or comes from our true self, and how much of it is just brainwashing, right? Because
there's another word for it. Yes.
Yeah. We are kind of brainwashed, when you look at it, if you can see through that, to see through the brainwashing. I feel like we're all brainwashed on some level until you really look at yourself and look at situations and things that are happening, really to look together. It's something, I always talk about Krishnamurti because I read him a lot and I listen to him a lot. But he always said, let's look at this together. Just look at it. Leave your opinions outside, but let's look together with an open heart and an open mind and see where it takes us. And that's what I'm interested in.
Well, that's right. And that's a good way to look at it. There's a lot of ways to slice this pie. But it's objective, critical thinking in reality. And also, too, I think it comes down to understanding. And I always love to put up this diagram. I can't emphasize how this model, for me at least, really makes sense. And that is the lower conscious mind. It's really the keyboard, the mouse, and the screen. Or if you like, the steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the brakes. It's an interface. They say the human mind itself might be a conscious attenuator. Because when you think about it, look at an IQ test, and it's all stuff we've been exposed to in our perception of conscious reality or accepted reality. And yet the innate intelligence of a human being, I don't think is truly measured by that. Now, some people will dispute that, but that's my opinion. Innate common sense, I think, is very hard to measure. And human intelligence is very high, and so are very many of the animals out there. And they can't recite anything about an IQ test. Try and outsmart some of those animals. They're pretty smart. So that's why they call them foxes, right? And other animals. But right. I know, I grew up in the woods. I saw some, and they're pretty doggone smart. Watch an eagle sometime. I mean, absolutely stunning how these animals live and how smart they are. But anyways, back to the subject at hand. And you're bringing up good points here, because many of the mystics throughout history, whether you're Christian, whether you're Buddhist, whether you're Islamic, whether you're Hebrew, it doesn't matter. All of the great truth seekers sought to make us examine our perception of reality. And that's a really key thing. And what I'm trying to get to here is all the evidence in many of the ancient and profound texts from Egypt, Chaldea, Sumeria, the Vedantic stuff, on and on and on, the Hebrew especially. Amazing, because it's all showing that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and that there are profound forces behind the planets. Now, astronomers will laugh at that. Well, it's masses and gases and cycles and all this and all that. Fine. But then why do we have such an interest in the celestial phenomena of astrology? Because that's really what it is. It's astronomy. And again, I was a skeptic of this stuff, and I got exposed to it in the 70s. I'm like, come on, astrology, schmology, how can this stuff work? And I examined it. And I went, wow, it's amazing. And some of the most profound minds in history have examined it. Look at Jung. Look at so many. Krishnamurti's another one. All these people who come along, and they always called it the sacred secret science, especially the older, what we call traditional astrology or classical. This is the pre-1700 stuff that goes all the way truly back to Egypt and before, and Greece and many other places. And of course, the Vedantic stuff, and the Chinese had it as well. So it's really all the examination of soul having a physical experience. And the Nadi astrology, in my opinion, really shows that the constituent energies in your chart you may have created in a previous life, or you're sharing that with the karmic incarnational forces of the people you interact with. Like, I'm amazed every day. Like today, I'm talking about somebody. I said, God, I'll bet your dad was super. How'd you know? Super smart. I said, oh my God, he was so smart. He was, a dean of a university, and he did this and he did that. And I said, yeah, well, the sun, signifactor of the father, is conjunct Mercury. I see other times where, oh, I bet your dad was a good mechanic. How'd you know he was a mechanic? I said, well, the sun is with Mars. See, right off the bat, Mars always rules more forceful mechanics. He could have been a fireman, could have been whatever. But you'll find the signs that these planets are in and the conditions that they're aspected by in Nadi astrology are profound. Now, back to the hidden forces of the universe, this proves that what we've got here is a divine matrix. It's not a computer program with a guy in a beard and a bunch of TV screens like in the Matrix. And that's where that movie fell apart a little bit for me. It's much more divine than that. When you look at, we have 360 degrees of a circle. You've got that many days in a year, 365 is what it works out to be. And then, of course, you've got untold billions of fixed stars, most of which we can't even ascertain. You have 12 signs, 12 houses. You literally have a reality machine here. And going back to what is astrology, it might actually be the satellite transmitters of soul force energy in the Briatic and Absolute worlds down into Yetzirah and to us, as well as probably many other beings on other planets. And it's very interesting because there seems to be a protective force that always keeps the world from being completely destroyed. Now, I know we've heard about Noah and the floods, and it does seem that it does happen from time to time. Divinity, God, whatever you want to say, does seem to pull the lever and reset things. And I think there's been a lot of that. One of the interesting things about this whole element of resets is the astrology seems to show when the pages of society turns. And I've been saying 2020 was really it. And now we're at a turning point where I think one of the most important countries in the history of humanity, at least as we know it, is on the chopping block. And that is the Pluto return. And just, give you an idea what that one's about. The Roman Empire was destroyed on a Pluto return. And many other historians have looked back and found generally 240 to 250 year cycles was the rise and the destruction of great empires. So, and we're at that right now. And I think this is important that we not be divided, but be really holding accountable everybody who wants to destroy this great nation and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I've been talking about this a lot, but you can see how much it's being attacked. And so many smart people are becoming aware of that. And
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What I love is that it literally is all mapped out in the astrology. It really is. And I always say this. That's why I cherish the astrology so much, because it is a guide and a protector in a sense. If you really look deeply at it and analyze it properly or analyze it well, it really is a protector and a guide. And I feel like we should all be using it in our lives if we can.
Yeah, especially if you use it the right way. I really think we need to always have our desires, our free will, and our goals and our ambitions. And I think astrology helps us maybe understand the cycles that we all go through. It's so important. I'm always amazed at how many ways the ancients used astrology. For instance, to use it for positive purposes, I have found clearing buildings and people and places at good astrological times really has a very powerful effect. I think one of the most unbelievable types of astrology is something known as interrogation, horary, or prashna. Those are all synonyms for just asking questions. That's probably one of the most unique types of astrology. And what's fascinating is you can ask about anything under the sun, and the eastern horizon becomes the person asking the question. And I want to talk about that for a minute. There's an ancient term in India, and no one knows where the etymology came from. It could have been Sanskrit, could have been Tamil, could have been, all these different languages. Dravidian could be possible. Also, it's called Vilagna. And you go, well, what the heck is that, right? That is synonymous with what modern astrologers call the ascendant. Well, what's the ascendant? It's the eastern horizon, right? And it's always changing throughout the day. So it brings sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. And of course, those are the four major points at where the sun rests at those first moments in time. But they're also the division points of a continuously moving cycle that never, ever, ever stops. And here's what's interesting. When you look at the eastern horizon, I talk a lot about people's guardian angel, and I actually carve that on gemstone pendants. And also, you can see the guardians, if you will, that guide the soul through these angelic degrees of the zodiac. Well, I looked up the etymology of the word Vilagna, which Lagna in Vedic astrology means ascendant. It just means the eastern horizon, the point in time which it happens. Well, they say the guardian angel ties our spirit, psyche, and soul to the embryo conception, and it's attached like by silver cord. But when we exit the womb at first breath, bam, the spirit, psyche, and soul is tied in permanently. And think about breath. A child is not breathing prior to that first breath, right? Before that, attached to the mother's umbilical cord, the blood, the breath, the food, everything comes through that. And all of a sudden, that's an autonomous being. It's now born. It's awake. It's on its own. Cut the umbilical cord, smack them on the rear end. Good luck, kid. Hope you make it, right? So the bottom line is, we all were there. The etymology of Vilagna means caged, like a soul cage. It also means cast or fixed, or it means solidified. And that's why most astrologers spend a lot of time looking at the Lagna or ascendant, which means the same thing. And I find I can always tell when a birth time is exact, because if the angel doesn't line up with the kind of personality undercurrents that I'm sensing with the client, I know probably don't have the right time. And it's amazing how accurate it is, which in my opinion proves that astrology in the earth is where spirit manifests. And truly, we're much more than that. And I think when we examine that and we become less manipulated, we become more conscious and start connecting to the spirit and the lower portions of the soul, and hopefully the upper portions of the soul. And then we stop killing each other so much, right? And destroying the structures of creation. There's an old legend that the angel said to God once, and said, what the hell do you like these humans for? They're crazy. They destroy creation. They don't even believe we exist, and they don't appreciate anything. And God said to the angels, but they come back. They come back. They went through the ringer washer, through the spanking machine, and they came back. I call it the karmic spanking machine. So I only bring this up because I think we're heading down into a very powerful tunnel of transformation. between now and the next couple of years for the world at large in the United States. And I think the more we enter that with less direct egoic attachment and more conscious awareness, we're likely to get through it a lot at a much higher vibration. And there's a lot of souls here. There's over 8 billion people at best guesstimate right now.
And that's just people.
That's just people.
That's
yeah.
just
What
people.
about animals and plant life? The animal, mineral, and plant, and as well as human kingdoms are amazing. And let alone the other kingdoms that are mysteriously living on this earth. I want to mention, I have seen 2 craft in the last few days. I was out in Malibu leaving, and I saw a craft over Paradise Cove out there. That's very close to where Johnny Carson's house used to be. And I know the FAA requires flashes every 15 seconds on any moving craft that is licensed by the FAA. And this thing was hanging there, and it was pretty big, and it wasn't flashing. And I knew it was something. I actually psychically felt it, and it just rocketed off. And this is out by Zuma Beach, where many military people know that they have been watching craft come in and out of there at exceedingly fast propagational speeds, almost immeasurable. And again, I think it was about 40 years ago, I was teaching a class at a college, and one of the students told me, he said, yeah, my dad's an admiral. And he says, we take submarines up underneath the California coast all the way to almost Salt Lake City. And I'm going, And then I'm hearing, there's all kinds of extraterrestrial activity, or it might even be terrestrial activity. We tend to say UFO or UAP, but I think it's a lot more like Men in Black than we'll ever know. That's my opinion. And then I saw another craft, I think just 2 nights ago. Very strange. It was a cylindrical craft, right? Probably not more than 1,000 to 2,000 feet above me. I looked up, and it looked like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was red, and then it had this dome in the middle with not really rays coming out, just this like yellow illumination, and it didn't move. And of course, I was on a motorcycle, and I didn't want to spend too much time at 60 miles an hour bending my head around to see it, but I know what I saw. And I looked in the rear view mirror up at it, and I don't think I saw it or couldn't make it out. But these are definitely some type of craft that is either terrestrial or extraterrestrial. And it's coming out a lot right now that the government has been disclosing this. I think they've been involved with it forever. I mean, you go back to the Egyptian times, there's Vedantic literature in the Rig Veda. It talks all about these extraterrestrial beings being here. The Egyptians, there's belief that they were actually maybe involved or partially was them. So very interesting stuff. Lots of hidden stuff to the universe. Way more than we're ever going to be able to cover, and way more than I'm ever going to know about or anybody else drawing breath in this consciousness. But fun stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could talk about it all day long. Thanks so much, Jeff. Thank you all for joining us again. Take good care of yourselves. Have a good week. And let us know if you see some craft. We'd like to know. Let us know in the comments below. Take good care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.